NBC's Hala Garani joins us live on the ground in Beirut. Aaron David Miller is a senior fellow with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Hala, what more can you tell us about the tragic deaths of both these journalists and these babies?
Well, we're seeing on-the-ground footage of a press vehicle, clearly marked press, which was parked, according to the hospital, outside of hospital grounds of Auda Hospital, which is in the central part of the Gaza Strip. We understand that there were 5 journalists inside that vehicle and that the vehicle was targeted while they were sleeping inside of it. One of the journalists, according to reports, was at the hospital because his wife was in labor, about to give birth to their child. So the 5 journalists were killed. They worked for Al-Quds Television, which is a Gaza-based TV station. The IDF said that it targeted in that part of Gaza a Palestinian Islamic Jihad target there without really providing evidence of the fact that it was militants that it was targeting. We actually, for NBC News over the last year, have conducted investigations into the record number of journalist deaths in the Gaza Strip. Right now, the Committee to Protect Journalists is saying that the number of media workers and reporters killed in the Gaza Strip since October 7th of 2023 has now risen to 141, which is a record number since it began counting in 1992. And there have been many instances where the IDF, the Israeli military, has said that they've targeted militants. One example, for example, Ismail Al-Ghul, who was an Al Jazeera reporter. It produced documentation that showed that he was a Hamas militant when he would have been 10 years old, for example. So a lot of this evidence, when poured over by journalists and by investigators, sometimes really doesn't hold up. And there are accusations, certainly among Palestinians, that there is an attempt to deliberately target media workers, Chris.
So, Aaron, we have been here before. We have talked about tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And it does come to a point, you know, whether we're talking about what's happening in Afghanistan, whether we're talking about what happens in Gaza, that people can become exhausted, right, immune to the horrors of war, the very real horrors of war. Do you think any of this breaks through? Does any of this give any impetus at all to a deal that we keep hearing is close but never quite comes together?
Thanks for having me, Chris. I wish I had better news for the new year. I don't think it does. I think this simply hardens the positions of the 2 major combatants. The Israelis are determined. Look, the war in Gaza, for all practical purposes, should be over. The Israelis have destroyed Hamas as a military organization. Now the issue is whether or not they want to prevent Hamas from emerging as any sort of organized entity at all. And it centers around the reality that this Israeli government is simply determined to prevent Hamas from gaining any political victories. And as a consequence, I think, you have a hardening of Israel's positions and Hamas's, by the way, in terms of any sort of hostage deal. The major issues separating the 2 combatants now are the character and number of Palestinian prisoners, many with blood on their hands, to be released, and the numbers of Israelis that will be released in a first phase. Hamas can't provide proof of life on the numbers of Israeli hostages who are being held and where the bodies of those who have died are buried. So this whole issue is now caught up and even made worse, I think, to a degree by the transition that we're about to experience to a new administration. And I think this could figure in part. The Prime Minister of Israel has accepted an invitation, according to reports, to attend the inauguration. I hope his calculation is not to wait until the new president is inaugurated in an effort either to give Donald Trump a political victory in claiming that he was responsible for the release of the hostages, or to use Donald Trump's justification for making the kinds of concessions that the Israelis are having a hard time making with respect to the numbers of Palestinian prisoners that are going to be released in a first phase. So it's complicated. And meanwhile, Chris, the hostages, their families, 2 million Palestinians in Gaza have suffered far too long. All of these, it's tragedy, and innocents are caught up, including journalists.
So you understand negotiating. You've been involved in very complex negotiations. So let me ask you this question. When you get to a point like this, and maybe there aren't exact parallels because, as you say, we're going to have a transition from two very different kinds of administrations with very different relationships with Prime Minister Netanyahu. But if there is to be a breakthrough, how does that happen?
From my experience in negotiations, and this is one that is different. I've never been involved in a negotiation between two combatants, one an organized terror group which willfully and indiscriminately killed Israeli civilians and took them hostage, and a government of Israel which is visited in an effort to prosecute their war against an organization that embeds their assets in and around and below civilian populations, has expanded their target sets clearly with respect to civilian targets. I've never been a part of that kind of organization, but the one thing that rings true about all negotiations, Chris, is deals happen when both parties are in a hurry, when there is urgency. And I still believe that Hamas needs a deal in order to reset and to free itself from the pressures that it's under. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu, emboldened by recent Israeli military activities, about to enter into a relationship with a president who is far more inclined, I think, to accept Israeli arguments on this particular question. I think Netanyahu actually has more capacity to accept a deal than ever before. But as you get to the end state, the positions of the two parties necessarily harden as each understands the difficulty of explaining to their constituents the concessions that they're about to make and whether or not the deal, frankly, was worthwhile.
A very hard reality check. Aaron David Miller, always good to have you on the program. Thank you.